They say money can't buy you happiness, but sure gets pretty close. And the best thing it does is relieve you of stress. And that is actually one of the biggest problems with people that deal with autism or deal with loved ones with autism is dealing with it can be expensive. Um, so I'm actually really excited to have found this little gem um, from mercyhealthsystem.org. They have a new autism support fund. Well, I don't know how new, but it seems to be new based on the article. Um, so let's jump right into it. It's a very simple article, and we got two other great ones for today's video. So let's. I wanted to start with some awesome news and a great resource. I think that hopefully some can take advantage of that are local to this area. We'll get into the details right now. So, when a child is newly diagnosed with autism, the cost of resources can be overwhelming. I mean, think of all the education. Mercy Health Development Foundation's Autism Support Fund can help. The Autism Support Fund was created to help families cover the cost of additional beneficial resources and therapies that have very limited outside funding, such as social skill classes, sensory equipment, safety equipment, respite care, therapeutic materials. Okay, so who's eligible? The most important part. And I like that this doesn't, well, I'm going to read it. Wisconsin families living in Rock and Walworth counties with children ages 2 to 21. That's the part I love. I love that it doesn't stop at 18. Granted, it's just a few more years, but that's great. Who have been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder by a licensed psychologist or behavioral health professional are eligible. Slight downside because, especially if you're 18 and there's not a lot of resources beforehand that you weren't diagnosed, chances are it's going to be very difficult to get diagnosed after the fact. And I wish there was a way to I wish there was a way like to help with that. Okay. Your child doesn't need to be Mercy Health patient to qualify. How to apply? Grant applications are accepted in January, April, July, and October. So it's quarterly, um, obviously by what I read. You may submit in an application for one item per quarter for a maximum of $500 per year in Rock County and $1,000 per year in Walworth County. Um, Applications are going to be here. There's also ability to donate to the fund, as you can see. So this will be linked directly into the show notes. Um, yeah, I mean, this is, I mean, fantastic to have like this. It's, I mean, every little bit helps. I mean, granted, I mean, the downside is per year. I mean, long term wise, but I mean, got to start somewhere, and that's what's appreciated is when it gets started. All right, next article. All right, so this one is actually French. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce uh, Connaison. I don't know. I don't know French. French scientists say new drug may improve life of people with autism. A recent study tested a bromide ion treatment on mice and found it eased signs of the conditions. Tests are still in the early stages, however. Obviously, that's the thing with like I keep with the my new siphoning, a lot of this stuff is going to be very early treatments. So, but I mean, everything's exciting. I mean, that's what's kind of the nice thing is like when you look at when you when I started looking, it's like okay, there is a lot of research. So then, I mean, like, it gives you hope. All right. By Hannah Thompson, a new drug that helps to ease the symptoms of autism have been found to be successful in animals and could offer new hope for humans who struggle with the condition, a team of researchers in France has reported. In the study, researchers found that bromide ion treatment helped to improve interactions, limit repetitive behaviors, and reduce anxiety among autistic test subjects. Findings were published in the April 2020 issue of scientific journal Neuropsychopharmacology. The researchers looked at three different mouse models of autism from across the spectrum over a long time period and found improvements in mice that had autistic type neurodevelopmental issues. The study comes from researchers at several establishments, including the Public Health Research Group, INSERM National Research Center, the CNRS Food and Environment and Research Institute, INRAE, and University of Tours. Dr. Julie Lemaire, man, forgive me on these names. What are we going to do? Co author of the study and research director at the CNRS said we tested the effect of bromide ions on mice. In autism, there's a change in the balance between excitation and inhibition in the brain. We tested this molecule, which inhibits the brain, on 3 models of autistic pathology with different mechanisms. We then carried out the most precise behavioral analysis possible on these mice. And we observed a reduction in the stereotype behavior of the animals. The mice made fewer circles around themselves. I guess you might call that the stimming part of what they were doing. Mice also showed fewer symptoms of anxiety. Yeah, I like to have less anxiety. Um, okay, so next steps in the trials. For the time being, the research is only a at preclinical stage, meaning it's only being tested on animals. Further tests will be needed to see if humans responded the same way to the drug. Human trials have not yet been confirmed. Dr. Lemaire, I'm guessing because it's French, we researched a major challenge. So far, autism research has not been very successful. Thanks. So these initial results are not guaranteed success. But hey, we're getting somewhere. Every failure is something you learn, right? Recent studies on the effect of the drugs include balvo, 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 balvaptan, oxytocin, yeah, oxytocin and bumetanide, have been successful. Professors Frederic Bonnet Brilhalt, head of research of the psychiatric department at the Tours University Hospital and head of Centers d'Excellence Autisme in France, told 20 Minutes. There have been many disappointments over the past 2 years. This discourages laboratories from investing in autism research, even though there is a real need for it. Autism is the only field of medicine where therapy concerns the re-education of language and motor skills, but we are sorely lacking in a therapeutic arsenal of medicine. Bromide ions will need to be tested with care due to the risk of side effects, the researchers said. Dr. Lemaire explained there's no addictive effect, but from certain doses onwards, we can see a sedative effect, disturbances in skin rashes. As soon as we see the first signs, we stop and they disappear. The problem is that with the drug, this margin between effective and toxic dose is small. So, very tiny window of not great symptoms and good effects. It is thought that the drug could be administered via oral drops, especially for young children for whom tablets are not suitable. A complete to existing treatment. Even if the drug is successful and eventually approved for use in humans, the treatment would not replace behavioral approaches used today, but would complement them, explained Jerome Becker, researcher and head of the Child Psychiatry Department at the University of Tours. He said, "We are not going to cure the condition, but could make life easier for patients, especially adults. We will first target children and adults with major disabilities. Autism affects around 700,000 people in France, of which 2/3 are adults. There is currently no medicine available specifically to treat autism, which we know." So, here we are. So, I would like to end with this little. Where are we at? With this little bit, because this has been an interesting one. We bring it up here. We brought it up many times. This is from ucsc.edu, University of Santa Cruz. Autistic adults have been increasingly visible in media, books, television, and more in the past decade, but challenges with representation persist. So it's like there's good and bad with what's been happening with representation of media, because I mean look at it this way. A lot of people are kind of find like their education comes from TV and movies, so the problem is a lot of that is fiction. My wife has admitted it's like, yeah, it's like certain things like, isn't that how it is in the movies? Isn't that real life? I'm like, no. Prime example. No, I'm going to skip the example in my head and just keep going to the article. All right. New research from UC Santa Cruz shows incremental improvements in the representation of autistic adults in film, television, books, media coverage, and advocacy organization websites. The study, published in the journal Autism in Adulthood, follows up on the 2011 paper Infantilizing Autism in Disability Studies, Quarterly, which had found that popular portrayals of autism were overwhelmingly focused on children, which is very true. That is a complaint, especially among adult autistic individuals, is like when they're going into research for getting a diagnosis or uh, aid of any kind, between financial and health, whatever. Um, the difficulty is that generally when you start that road of research, that path of research, it typically leads immediately to resources for parents for young children, specifically more or less children. Not even really a lot kind of for teens. I mean, a lot of it translates, but it really does target children, and you see that in kind of the media. Okay, the earlier paper had raised alarm about the lack of representation of adults with autism, true, which can limit public awareness of the unique needs of some autistic adults, like employment and housing accommodations. At the time, the authors of the 2011 paper, Jennifer L. Stevenson and Bev Harp and Morton and Gernsbacher, theorized that the bias towards representing children might be due to factors like advocacy organizations being led by parents and clinicians and the predominant focus of initial diagnosis and treatment for autism, which is true. I mean, when they start these programs, they're looking to give what a head start to what they probably didn't have with their kids, so they're trying to help other parents, because I mean that's what you lock in on your tribe. So it's like they are hoping to provide for what they didn't have. I mean, they're not the ones with autism. I mean, that's why probably like I don't really know any mainstream um, of these kind of organizations that are run by autistic individuals. Uh, so yeah, so I mean, a lot of these major other organizations, yeah, they're going to be targeting parents. However, since then, the neurodiversity movement has continued to grow. Yeah, especially in as autistic self-advocates have worked to shift focus on to how autistic people can flourish throughout their lives. And a new team of researchers led by the UC Santa Cruz psychology professor Namira Akhtar wondered whether these efforts and other potential influences may have affected representation of autism over the past decade. So they set out to replicate the 2011 study. This is an important Oh my gosh. Okay. This is an important issue to track because autistic adults often say it's very annoying to them that autism is almost always depicted to having to do with children, and it's like that it's making them invisible. And that's true in this is like, okay, it's like, okay, you become an adult, get over your autism. That's kind of what it feels like. I mean, that's what it's felt like, and I think I have the same sentiment from other autistics. My fellow quirks. Okay. Akhtar said they talk about how it's like they fall off a cliff when they turn 18 because there are very few resources available for them after that. But of course, you don't stop being autistic and needing accommodations when you become an adult. To see how trends in representation may have changed, one place a research team looked was the websites of some well-known autism advocacy and charity organizations. Autism Speaks, yay. In reviewing online materials from 49 state and regional chapters of Autism Society of America, the team found that 20% of the photographs depicting autistic individuals were of adults compared to only 5% of the photos that were in 2011. Study had originally reviewed these sites. While children were still heavily favored, this was statistically significant improvement in 80% of websites at least mentioned autistic adults and linked to related resources. A review of 16 additional autism charity organization websites found similar results. Oh, that's great. I mean, yeah, it's because that's the thing with autism. Like, we need the representation from time you get it, once you figure out you have it, to the point you basically die. I mean, it doesn't go away. The study also looked for trends across the entertainment industry. Researchers analyzed 124 movies and television shows released between 2010 and 2019 that featured autistic characters. They found that 58% of these characters were children, whereas 68% of the autistic characters were children in the 2011 paper's original analysis. So we had a 10% decrease, essentially. Yeah, because now we went from 58 to 6, or was 68%. Now it's down to 58%. Yeah. The new paper says one factor that could be contributing to this improvement is that production teams are increasingly bringing in consultants to advise on proposed portrayals of autism, likely due to calls for more accurate representation from autistic self-advocates. However, levels of representation were quite different in the publishing industry. So now we're getting into our books. The research team reviewed 484 English language fiction books published between 2010 and 2017. That included a mention of an autistic character in the book's description. 81% of the characters were children compared to 91% at the time of the 2011 paper's analysis. So we had, again, another 10% decrease. This was statistically significant improvement despite the lingering disparity. The new paper conducted additional analysis showing that representation was better among books geared toward adult audiences, in which 67% of autistic characters were children. So that's good. The research team also analyzed 90 news stories from print, television, and radio media outlets in the United States that featured one autistic individual and were published between April and May of 2020. 58% of these stories featured autistic children compared to 79% of the stories in a similar analysis for the initial study. And they're generally fluff pieces, and generally they're kind of usually stories related to them technically overcoming their autism or like businesses and other stuff. I mean, that's great. I mean, that's the whole point of this channel, is to just find these pieces and bring, positivity and awareness. So, it's like this channel's not going to exist without those articles. We need them. And what I definitely would like to see is better roadmaps of what they have, how they help or are helped to get to where they are, self-sufficiency, financial independence, living independence, stuff like that. That's the stuff I'd like to continue to see in these when they do these interviews and look for autistic individuals for these fluff pieces. Okay. But the new paper notes that even though autistic adults are increasingly represented in news media, they may still be portrayed as childlike. Yeah, so kind of like what I told you. For example, the study showed that 1/3 of the news stories that included autistic adults also mentioned their parents. Which is true. It's like if they opened up, what's the one that guy opened up his own coffee shop because couldn't get a job for stinking Starbucks. It was like, well, guess what? He got money from parents. He didn't have it. And they did a lot of the legwork. Okay. Prior research has found that non-autistic researchers, parents, and clinicians are more likely to be presented as experts on autism than are autistic adults themselves. I'm going to put it this way. I would think it's almost fair to say. I could be wrong. So call me out. But if you're autistic, you're already a professional on it. You're a pro. You're living with it. Overall, the authors of the new study say that while their findings show a shift toward more numerical representation of adults in portrayals of autism, there's still plenty of room for improvement. As always, I mean, that's true all the time, including in the capacity of those representations to truly reflect the lived experience of autistic adults, like myself. That's why I started the TikTok. I'm still not great at posting, but I did Ballistic Autistic IRL. So, I think I've mentioned this. I do dog grooming, mobile dog grooming, so I'm going to try posting more of that in my posts. So if you like that kind of cool stuff, follow me on TikTok. UCSC Associate Professor of Philosophy, Janet Dineshak, a co-author of the new paper, says she hopes further improvements in representation might include increased attention to the intersectionality of autism with gender, race, ethnicity, and other social categories or identities. Because that is a big thing. It's like, it's there. I mean, you can't demand change because people are slow to change. So it's not like within the next year we're going to have 10 different movies with the vast spectrum of the kind of autistic spectrum, behavioral, and severity of it. We're not going to have one with like, you're going to like break it down. So like 50-50, like 50 of them are like 100 movies need to be made, and 50 of them have to make sure they're male and 50% make female or whatever. And then there's like, then you have to break down those into the subcategories of race and ethnicity and being verbal and nonverbal. And we're not, but it's just the effort, we need to continue. All right. Where am I? Yeah. We need to see a continued increase in the numbers of representations of autistic adults, along with an improvement of the manner of that representation to reflect the heterogeneity of how autism manifests across a person's lifespan, she said. Autistic people need to be part of the conversation on how to improve that representation, and they also need to be given the space to represent themselves. Perfect. I think that ended on a perfect note. Um, yeah. I mean, this is a fantastic, you know, I mean, this is a nice, great piece to end because it's just, you know, positivity is like, yes, there is better representation. And as long as autistic individuals are obviously not, you can't be consulted in every project, but it's like when there's blatant disregard for that community, especially because the recognition is happening so much more, we don't want it to be, what's the best way to put it? I mean, the perfect example is Sia's movie music. I mean, just like it felt like it's just so poorly done, and like, and it's just obvious like there was no idea of really the autistic lifestyle, and especially some of the poor things that were included in the movie, and it has to have that horse beaten until it is fine powder and spread across the earth because it was the pinnacle of being poorly done to represent a community, even though it was done, I still believe, in good faith. But that good faith was tarnished with her ignorance and cruelty of being just mean about it. I mean, couldn't take a critique about what the problem was with her movie. So, that said, all right. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace.